Welcome to Field 302, Writing an Exam in Philosophy. Introduction. Every student loves to have the best grade when examining in the courses he or she takes in an exam, but not all students make the needed efforts to have such good grades. Moreover, many of those who are willing to have good grades do not know how best to go about it. The lectures above give a detailed explanation needed by any student or researcher in philosophy to excel in philosophical writing and research. But for the sake of a philosophy student who aims at good grades as he or she writes a test, an exam, a term paper, or seminar in a course, it is fitting that we summarize and emphasize some key points already discussed above. This lecture therefore focuses on explaining to the philosophy students how to prepare for course tests, exam, term paper, and seminars. Objective: to highlight points for preparing for a philosophy test or exam, to examine some general guidelines for writing a philosophy term paper or seminar. Content: preparing for a test or exam. Preparing for a test does not start just before the test or exam is written. The suggestion provided below can only work effectively for a philosophy student only if he or she has been studying responsibly in his or her course of study. Studying responsibly involves attending all lectures for the particular course, taking notes, reading the text and handouts for the course, asking questions, and discussing the topics with coursemates. When these have been done, the following points will then be useful for preparing for a test or exam. 1. Reread the course textbooks. If there is too much material to be reread, all of it must be reread. Then read those parts that you marked as the most important, either in the text or in the notes you have made while reading in the first or second time through. 2. Reread your class notes and handouts. This will assist the student in identifying areas that the lecturer has emphasized in class and areas to concentrate on when reading through the textbooks. 3. Outline and organize the material to be tested so that it forms some intelligible pattern that can be more easily remembered. 4. Write down specific questions that you think might be plausibly asked. Then actually write out answers to these questions. Write essays to answer essay questions. Do not merely think about answers. The best way to find out how much one knows is to see how much one can put down correctly and coherently on paper. You'll be graded for what you put down on paper, not what is in your brain. G.F.W. Hegel wrote that every young man has a great novel in his head. Though he appeared being sarcastic, what he meant is that such novels not being produced are worthless. Actually, writing out an essay will force the student to organize the information. 5. Revise your essay answers. Reorganize and supplement your essays with detailed information and examples. Aside from the structure of an essay, the single most important difference between an A grade and a C grade is the amount of orderly detail and argumentation that the student provides. Even if none of your essay questions is asked, it is very likely that parts of your prepared essays can be used in other essay questions. A good essay answer has the same features as any good essay: an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Be sure to state in general what your answer to the question is in the introduction. Then support that answer with detailed information and argumentation in the body of the essay, and then very briefly summarize what you have done. It is quite possible that a student may not follow all of the suggestions just given, but the student should try his very best. Although the suggestions are presented in the order in which they should be done, they are also presented in inverse importance. That is, suggestion 5 is the most important and 1 the least. If a student begins his or her preparation with 5, then he or she will know what he or she must look for in taking the earlier suggestions. 6 fundamental principles for writing a term paper. As noted earlier, an essay written by a student, whether as an answer to an exam question, a seminar, or a term paper, has or ought to have the same structure as any good essay written in scholarly philosophy books and peer-reviewed journals. Such structures, styles, and forms have been examined in more details in previous lectures. However, we shall attempt to highlight some of these major points here that a student must bear in mind while writing a term paper or seminar paper for a course in philosophy. Manuel Vangels identifies 6 fundamental principles that guide students as they write their seminar papers and term papers. They are: 1. Get the exegesis. When a student is working on the part of his or her paper that involves exposition of what a philosopher allegedly says, he or she should make sure he or she gets the point right. Discussing with others, both students and tutors, can help. Nothing would affect your grade more than getting an otherwise great paper that just misunderstands what the relevant philosophers actually meant. One way of doing this is to be very clear on 2 things: understanding what any particular article or chapter is intending to do, and being clear on what someone is claiming is absolutely essential. 2. Make arguments. A student does not only expose a philosopher's view, but analyzes them to locate points that might be important but has been ignored by the philosopher. It is, however, not enough to identify such points. The student must argue for them by providing reasons why they are true and why they should be accepted. 3. Think about counter examples. This is one of the most important tools in philosophy. Criticizing a paper by reference to counter examples allows a student to quickly show the implausibility of some claim. Of course, this cannot always be done. A student may not always come up with a counter example in every paper he or she writes in the class, but it is an ideal to strive for. Counter examples are also important when defending one's own position, since one of the most important things to do is to consider possible counter examples to your claim. 4. Do self-critical work. Something that every student should really try to do when finishing with a write-up is to consider how someone would reply. This is really just a broadening of the point made above about considering counterexamples, and it is repeated below in the comments about the basic formats of any philosophy paper. A student should work on trying to figure out how someone might object to what he or she has said, and whether his or her position can overcome the response. As suggested above, one way of doing this is considering possible counter examples. Doing this can make the difference between a good paper and a great paper. Of course, in papers of the size a student writes, this can be extremely difficult to do. Nevertheless, this is worth trying to work in any part of a particular topic where the student is given an opportunity to get critical. 5. Follow the basic format of any philosophy paper. A. Introduction, short to the point, and containing a clearly presented thesis. B. Presentation of the argument or claim you are going to analyze. C. Analysis of the argument. This is the part where reasons are given for thinking that the claim or argument being analyzed is problematic or defensible. This section is typically the first place where one displays ingenuity. D. Consider a response to your analysis. This is your second opportunity for a student to display his or her creativity, knowledge, and philosophical power. E. Conclude and summarize the same point, showing the reader how it all pans out and ultimately supports your thesis claim. Note, however, that at the end of one's paper, he or she realizes that the argument got to some place he or she didn't expect. It is better to go back and change the thesis claim to reflect the new direction of the paper. 6. Follow the formatting checklist. The key here is to remember that the course lecturer or grader is going to have to do a ton of grading. So anything one can do to make his or her life easier is going to be well received. It is particularly important to follow the stipulated guidelines for preparing the final manuscript, such as formatting styles, while typing, the referencing style, the number of pages, and so on. Louis Pogman summarizes this point as follows. 1. Identify the problem you have analyzed. For example, you might want to show that utilitarianism is a tenable theory. 2. As clearly as possible, state the problem and what you intend to show. For example, I intend to analyze the argument for and against act utilitarianism and show how utilitarianism can meet the main objections to it. 3. Set forth your arguments in logical order and support your premises with reasons. It helps to illustrate your point with examples or to point out counterexamples to opposing points of view. 4. Consider alternative points of view as well as objections to your own position. Try to meet these changes and show why your position is more plausible. 5. Apply the principle of clarity to your opponent's reasoning. Give his or her case the strongest interpretation possible. For unless you can meet the strongest objection to your own position, you cannot be confident that your position is the best. I should add that applying the principle of charity is one of the hardest practices in philosophical discussion. Even otherwise, very good philosophers have an inclination to caricature or settle for a weak version of their opponent's argument. 6. End your paper with a summary and a conclusion. That is, painstakingly review your arguments and state what you think you have demonstrated. In the conclusion, it is always helpful to show the implication of your conclusions for other issues. Answer the question, why does it matter? 7. Be prepared to write at least 2 drafts before you have a working copy. It helps to have another philosophy student go over the preliminary draft before you write a final draft. Make sure that your arguments are well constructed and that your paper as a whole is coherent. 8. Regarding style, write clearly and in an active voice. Avoid ambiguous expressions, double negatives, and jargon. Put other people's idea in your own words as much as possible and give credit to the text. And in bibliography, note whenever you have used someone else's idea or quoted someone. Knowing just when to credit another person is an exercise in good judgment. Why academics are rightly indignant with students who fail to refer to their sources. Some students are fastidious to a fault, even documenting where they had common knowledge. There is a middle way that common sense should be able to discover. 9. Include a bibliography at the end of your paper. In it, list all the sources you use in writing your paper. 10. Put the paper aside for a day or two, then read it afresh. Chances are you will find things to change. Following these suggested guidelines can help the student prepare an excellent essay that will attract excellent marks when graded. What affects your grade? Students are graded on at least 5 different levels: excellent or very good, good, fair or average, poor or below average, very poor, and bad. An excellent grade, often represented by an A, shows that the student has done excellently well in his essay to the extent that no changes or modifications are needed in the structuring and argument of the essay. In some cases, an excellent paper may need minor comments on style, organization, and substance. A good essay, often represented with a B, is well written but requires more comments about style, structure, and organization, which, if incorporated, can raise the essay to an A grade essay. An essay is graded fair or average, represented by a C, if it has some defects, not only in organization and style, but also in its content and argument. Some information and argument may have been missed, and fixing these is what makes the difference between an A graded paper and a C graded paper. A below average essay, often represented with a D, is not so much different from the average essay, only that the defect in the content and argument is more intense. A poor essay, represented with grade E, is much more defective in organization, style, substance, and content. A lot needs to be done in refurbishing the paper to a good or very good grade. The point, however, is that with diligence and effort, even an E-graded paper can be refurbished. But a bad essay represented by an F means that the student completely misses the point. Virtually everything about the paper is wrong. The essay misinforms rather than it informing. It is best for the student not to attempt repairing the paper. It is better to write a new one. Thus, a student should realize that the grade he or she gets depends much on him or her. Having been guided by the points in the sections above, the student should endeavor to avoid discussing off topic or paying too much attention to information that has no direct bearing on the topic at hand. If he feels that he or she needs to input the information, he or she may do so at endnotes or footnotes. The student should also endeavor to fully complete the assignment, defend the claims made, and avoid ignoring structure, style, and formatting requirements. Summary. Preparing for a test or an essay or writing a philosophy seminar or term paper begins long before the student writes anything down. As noted above, the student must have been studying responsibly, implying that the student must have been attending classes, taking notes, reading textbooks and handouts, asking questions, and discussing the topic with classmates. It is when this has been done that the guidelines highlighted above for writing a good test or exam and for writing a philosophy essay can be useful. Studying responsibly and applying the above guideline results in the best grade for students. This is the end of study session 8. Thanks for listening.